What is going on, guys? Ray here, PapaReys Boom Boom Room, back at it again with another week of the NFL season. Stardom, situms, and weekly picks. We are in week 9, past the halfway point of the season. Let's recap week 8. We have Atlanta beating the Carolina Panthers 25-17. Pittsburgh beating Baltimore 28-24. Buffalo beating New England 24-21. Cincinnati beating Tennessee 31-20. Las Vegas beating the Browns 16-6. Indianapolis beating Detroit 41-21. The Vikings beating the Packers 28-22. Kansas City stomping the Jets 35-9. Miami beating the Rams 28-17. Denver beating the Chargers 31-30. Seattle beating San Francisco 37-27. New Orleans beating Chicago 26-23. Philadelphia beating Dallas 23-9, and Tampa Bay beating the Giants 25-23. A lot of good games in week 8. Man, this season's full of a whole bunch of unexpected twists and turns. Fantasy wise, a lot of superstars not putting up numbers. Cowboys are falling apart. I don't know. It's super hard. On TikTok, people are like, "Oh, I can't believe you told me to play this person and they didn't do good." That's not my fault. That's not my fault, blood. Let's jump into our stardom situms for week 9, starting with the quarterback position. I'm going to say start Justin Herbert versus the Raiders. Start Cam Newton versus the Jets, even though they don't have too many weapons, but it's the Jets. Start Derek Carr versus the Chargers. Start Nick Foles versus the Bears. Start Matt Stafford versus the Vikings. Quarterbacks to sit. I would sit Teddy Bridgewater versus Kansas City. Sit Tua versus Arizona. Sit Phillip Rivers versus Baltimore. Sit Drew Lock versus Atlanta. And sit Jake Lawton, starting quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars this week versus Houston. Running backs I would start, of course, Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Carolina. James Conner versus the weak Cowboys rushing defense. Justin Jackson has been taking over the helm in Los Angeles. Start him versus Las Vegas. DJ Dallas versus Buffalo with 2 of the running backs in Seattle out. I would start Hasty and McKinnon or flex one of them versus Green Bay. And I would start J.K. Dobbins versus the Colts. Running backs to sit. I would sit Tyler Irving versus 49ers. Matt Breida versus Arizona. Wayne Gallman versus Washington. I would sit, honestly, Gordon and Lindsey versus Atlanta. And I would sit Devin Singletary versus Seattle. Moving on to our wide receivers, I would sit Sterling starts. I would start Sterling Shepard versus Washington. Start Fuller and Cooks versus Jacksonville. Start Hollywood Brown after those comments he made. I'm pretty sure he's going to have like a career game in targets against the Colts. Start Christian Kirk versus Miami. Some sleeper wide receivers, I'm thinking Jerry Jeudy and Antonio Brown, especially if Chris Godwin does not play this week. Look for Tom Brady to hook Antonio Brown up with his first game back. Wide receivers to sit. I would sit the Cowboy wide receivers versus the Steelers. Just can't trust them. Sit Emmanuel Sanders versus Tampa Bay. Sit Darius Slayton versus Washington. Sit any of the Jags wide receivers with his new QB starting this week versus Houston. Sit Devontae Parker versus Arizona. Just can't. I don't know. Tua did not impress me last week, so I wouldn't trust any receiver from Miami. Tight ends to start. I'll start Darren Waller versus the Chargers. Start Gronk versus New Orleans. Start T.J. Hawkinson versus the Vikings. Start Hayden Hurst versus Denver. And start Noah Fant versus the Falcons. Tight ends I would sit Jimmy Graham versus the Titans. Mike Gesicki versus the Cardinals. Dalton Schultz versus the Steelers, Trey Burton versus the Ravens, and Irv Smith versus the Lions. Moving on to our special teams, kickers, and defense. Kickers to start, Young Hoku versus the Broncos, Harrison Butker versus Carolina, Daniel Carlson versus the Chargers, Matt Prater versus the Vikings, and Chris Boswell versus the Cowboys. And defenses to start, Steelers versus the Cowboys, Texans versus the Jags, Arizona versus Miami, Washington versus the Giants, and Kansas City versus Carolina. Those are my picks fantasy-wise for this week, Week 9. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and, of course, TikTok. On TikTok, I answer a lot of the questions that many people may have, whether who they should start, picking between a few different people, helping you with your lineups. So if you guys have a TikTok, it's PapaReys Boom Boom Boom. Go ahead and follow me on there. That's where I've honestly been popping lately. So that's where I answer a lot of the questions. Let's go ahead and move on to our weekly picks. Weekly picks for Week 9. I'm going to say San Francisco over Green Bay, Seattle over Buffalo, Baltimore over Indy, Atlanta over Denver, Houston over Jacksonville, Kansas City over Carolina, Minnesota over the Lions, Chicago over Tennessee, Washington over the Giants, Las Vegas over the Chargers, Arizona over Miami, Pittsburgh over Dallas, Tampa Bay over New Orleans, and New England over the Jets. So that's going to do it for this week's podcast, guys. If you guys, like I said, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like and follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and, of course, TikTok. I hope you guys have a good week for fantasy, starting to pull away, or if you're trying to make that late season surge to get to the playoffs. Let me know. Let me know if you guys need help. You guys stay blessed and have a good fantasy football week.